of the European Council. One indication to the journalists that are with us: please use the symbol of the raised blue hand to ask for the floor. And now the Chancellor has the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We, after a very long meeting, have come to a good conclusion. And I am very gratified to know that Emmanuel Macron, the French President, and I sit with you and before you today. We can say that between the 18th of May, when we tabled our common initiative, and the 21st of July, we have come a long way and have covered a lot of important ground. Europe has shown that it is able to break new ground in a very special situation such as this one. I think that this is necessary. Exceptional occurrences, exceptional circumstances require, and this is the pandemic, require exceptional methods and measures. It has taken us a long time. I think it was only our predecessors who sat together in Nice took a little bit longer. I must say that I haven't verified this, but we have laid the financial foundations for the European Union for the next 7 years to come, and we have also come up with a response to this arguably biggest crisis of the European Union in the shape and form of a recovery fund. The basic structure of this recovery fund, as it was tabled by the Commission, has been maintained, and many of the proposals from the Franco-German initiative have also found a reflection in this. The overall volume of 750 billion has been kept. Grants have been a little less, with 390 billion, but loans have been kept with 360 billion. And I think that we have come some way to establish predictability. I would like to thank the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and her team, and of course also, and first and foremost, the Council President Charles Michel and his team. This is a recovery fund that is oriented towards the future, but also towards the fact that the single market in this, what is arguably the most difficult crisis of the European Union, can enable us to weather the storm, that countries that are most affected by the pandemic can use it in order to rebuild their economy. There are certain conditions that are tied to this climate. 30% of the expenditure will go towards expenditure for climate and also for digitalization. And there has been a long discussion, and I think that's understandable, on verification of those reforms. And here the Commission will play a very important role, but the Member States themselves will verify whether these reform efforts have been made. I would like to say here that what this was all about was to show the necessary resolve in tackling those problems. It wasn't easy, and that we needed so many days also shows that we've come from different vantage points, different perspectives. But what counts, I think, that in the end we came together, and that we are now determined to turn this into a successful model. Obviously, with the European Parliament, we will have very difficult discussions. The presidency that we have right now, as rotating presidency, will play an important role. And I hope that our colleagues in the European Parliament have seen that indeed we wrestled with each other in order to come up with a good solution, and we will, I hope and trust, also come into a good debate with the European Parliament. I'm very relieved. In February we were not able to make it, but now we have, and I think it's a very important message to the rest of Europe, but also beyond Europe, that this very special entity, this very special construct of 27 member states of the European Union that come from very different backgrounds is actually able to act together, and has proven that it is able to act together. And that's a very good message, I think. President, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chancellor. Thank you, Angela. Let me first express my condolences as regards the dramatic occurrences on the A7 in France. I would like to pay my condolences and respects to the family that has lost their lives and the children that have lost their lives. And I would like to, in taking up what the Chancellor has said, I would like to thank the President of the European Council, and Charles Michel, and also Ursula von der Leyen as President of the Commission. I would like to thank their respective teams for the efforts that they have put in preparing this summit. And I would also like to thank you, Madam Chancellor, as acting rotating presidency. And this summit has not only been one of the longest, as has been said already, or maybe the longest in the history of the European Union, but it is an even bigger success because after many months where we're not able to meet personally, this was a summit meeting where I trust the consequences of it will be indeed historic. We have created a possibility of taking up loans together, of setting up a recovery fund that in the spirit of solidarity. For the first time, we have been able to set up this fund with the volume that we intended it to have right from the outset, 715 billion. The Chancellor has already said grants to the tune of 390 billion. A little bit less than we originally envisaged, but it is still something that enables the member states to finance their own projects. As I said, it's a little less than the Franco-German plan that we tabled originally in May, but it is, after all, only a short time in the history of the European Union. Some of them, our colleagues said that they were rather surprised about the volume of this proposal of May. And it needed a spirit of compromise to make this happen, and I'd like to thank all of those who have shown this. This recovery fund will help us to almost double the European budget for the next years to come, and that is something that you have to acknowledge. Think of the distance that we've covered ever since February. We have not been able to come to some kind of agreement. It was just 1% of the EU's GDP, but now we have the MFF, we have the recovery fund, and this amounts to almost 2% of the GDP in the European Union. Obviously, the debates were characterized by different perspectives, by different opinions, by different backgrounds, but we've always worked for an ambitious plan. We've always worked together, and our common efforts over the past few weeks and months, and also over the past few years, have borne out that when Germany and France stand together, they may not be able to do everything, but if they don't stand together, nothing really will happen. And over the past few months, we've been able to overcome many obstacles. This plan, this budget will enable us to tackle the many challenges on health, on the economy, all of the different challenges that we have to face. And had we not done this, it would have meant to have only in a few months and in a few years to have to spend even more. Now, there are areas where we've been able to reach great things. For example, climate, the Green Deal that was adopted only a few months. We've also stood up for traditional areas such as agricultural policy, for example, that was stabilized. And this is about food security, food safety, and food self-sufficiency. Then the cohesion policy that will be maintained, and also the future policies, as the Chancellor has outlined, have been increased in volume. And I'd like to, in conclusion, highlight what I consider to be the most important matter. We have actually made an enormous step forward, a very important step forward. After many, many years of joint cooperation, we've been able to reach the stage of Meseberg in 2018, where we laid the groundwork for our common efforts. This recovery fund that is based on European solidarity is indeed a historic change, an historic step for Europe. This is the first time that we have been able to set up this budget capacity at this level with new projects, and also the perspective of trying to gather own resources. This means that we have joint responsibility, because there is obviously also a time frame for repayment, and we don't want future generations to bear the brunt of this effort. So a speedy repayment will be necessary, and this will enable us to tackle the social and economic and environmental challenges of the future. Alice Sanderson of TFA. Hello, good morning. I hope you can hear me. President, Chancellor, hello. This agreement, as you say, is a historic agreement. The frugals have been given you have made great concessions to the frugals. Do you not regret having to make the concessions of such magnitude? No, I don't regret that, says the Chancellor. I think one needs to see that a group of countries was not exactly enthusiastic about this new method of cooperation. They would have liked guarantees and not loans. But we have now come to a result where we have a little bit more grants and guarantees, I think, is the right response to this pandemic, and that means a readiness to strike a compromise. And we've done that. We think that we've acted responsibly in agreeing on these compromises, and they have enabled us to do the right thing on the whole. And those countries that have been receiving concessions are also those who will later on pay in the largest amount of grants to those countries who have been most affected. It is a painful compromise in many ways. Germany has decided not to completely participate in this and to desist from using it completely. That is our contribution as the largest economy. But on the whole, it was responsibly. Well, the net payer countries of a certain level have asked for rebates. So there has been this discussion, of course, and this was about the fact that there will always be net payers and net recipients. We are net contributors to this budget, but there have always been these differences. And one always tried to somewhat offset them and equalize them, but it was our ambition to make a compromise possible. And for that, it was necessary, as the Chancellor has said, to make compromises. Just remember where we've come from. Only a few days ago, some of our partners said we're basically completely against taking up common loans. And that this was possible in many ways is the most historic progress inherent in this agreement. Secondly, many who've accepted that have said, well, if we take out common loans, we cannot accept to give grants. They were completely against grants. But now all partners have accepted that. And in conclusion, they were for very little money, maybe not zero, but after 2 days and nights, we were at 250 billion. Now we're much, much closer to the original volume, 390 billion. These compromises that have been accepted to limit excessive contributions by some and to be able to rally the whole of the European family behind this agreement, I think they were necessary, these compromises. It was necessary to come to a good level of this recovery fund at in this crisis. Please, I would like to remind the journalists, please use this virtual blue hand if you want to ask a question. Now, Ansgar Hase from the German Press Agency. Good morning, Bonjour. A question addressed to the Chancellor. Can you tell us this morning that this new rule of law mechanism will enable you to cut funding for Poland and Hungary, for example, if they are to limit freedom of the press and freedom of opinion? And can you say what Hungary needs to do in concrete terms for ending the Article 7 procedure? And a question addressed to the President. Can you tell us why you have not been able to convince the Chancellor of foregoing the German rebate? I think the German rebate is part and parcel of a balanced agreement, and there's no need at all to let. You can clearly start from the assumption that we have not asked the same volume of rebates as all the others in order to make a compromise possible, but we were able to do quite a lot for the new German lender. Now, you know that the legislative act is debated, that the Commission tabled. It's debated in the Council. It needs to be adopted with a qualified majority, and we need to continue to work on this legislative act. We've also said that in the European Council we will be seized with the matter if there are still open questions. In our conclusions, we are committed to, on the one hand, accepting the principles of financing in the European Union and safeguarding it, and also upholding the principle of respect for rule of law, for respecting rights, basic rights, and we refer to this, but I must say that I refuse to single out one or two countries that maybe then fall under this legal act and this legislative act. This is a general term, and what sort of steps the Hungarian government has to take in order to bring this Article 7 procedure to such a level that it can be debated and agreed on in the Council. Well, Prime Minister Orban has said to me that he wants to bring this to a conclusion, that he doesn't want this to hang in the air, and we will support Hungary in doing that, but obviously the crucial steps will have to be taken by Hungary. Well, on the rebate, of course, one can regret that the principle of rebates has not been maintained here in the budget, but then one would have to change the underlying philosophy completely. One would have had to start with this in February already, but we concentrated on the priorities, that is to say, the crisis and the recovery fund. The whole of the rebates, so also the German rebate, was part and parcel of this negotiation box, and with Germany nothing has changed, and the whole work that we have done in these 4 days and nights together with the Chancellor was to convince other countries of it, and I'm telling you this as a fact. Germany has accepted not to increase the rebate, which means Germany has accepted that the net rebate is actually lower. And France also accepted that to offset the rebate of the others by foregoing some of it. So the reality is that France, Germany, Italy and other countries have actually accepted to finance a transfer dynamism in the direction of the biggest net payers in order to convince them that this is a good budget and to compensate something that they felt was not so attractive. So you see, that is not only a clear tribute to European solidarity, it is also something that's most important on the basis of our initiative, actually taking up loans together and also having transfer and solidarity mechanisms that didn't exist in the past. That was the most important thing, and it was only possible because we together accepted to finance it. So that's something that I needed to remind you of at this point in time. Montas from Politico will ask the next question. Good morning. Good morning, President. Good morning, Madam Chancellor. Congratulations on this agreement. Mr. President, you say that this fight for more solidarity was also an attempt at trying to identify whether Europe is just a market or is indeed a political project. Some may well feel that this victory, in a way, is tarnished by the fact that you had to make so many concessions. What do you reply to these people, those who are disappointed? And do you have the impression that Europe and your partners are actually aware of what one needs to do in order to come to, in order to turn Europe into a geopolitical force? I would not say that this victory is tarnished by the concessions that we've made. We're 27 member states around this table, and we were able to set up a common budget. Which other political entity or which other political area is able of doing that? Yes, it is an arduous road that one has to travel. It's not perfect. It is very difficult, but there is no perfection because there are so many diverse standpoints, so many diverse opinions, philosophies, so many differences. And I also said that there are certain areas, maybe we have difficulty to understand each other, but Angela Merkel and myself, we have been able to bring this matter forward because we've seen time and again in the discussions we had with others what their views were, and we were able to reconcile those views. So in the end, we've come to an agreement on something that for many wasn't actually a natural agreement. We've traveled a long way, politically speaking and philosophically and personally speaking, a very long way. And I hope that we can convince everyone that this historic moment in Europe's history requires you to go to make an additional effort. So we have set up a budget, and it's sometimes in one's political and personal life that you have to find the necessary means in order to address such a challenge and also to meet each other halfway. You have to offer something in return for something that the other person offers you. We want to have access to certain mechanisms. For example, on governance, we needed to have a different mechanism. We haven't talked about this. And also using this money. I mean, money, in a way, is a means to make it possible for people to have exchanges among each other. It's not a perfect means, but there is no perfect world either. We have been able to make progress, and compromises invariably lead to not having 100% of what you originally intended to get out of a negotiation. But historically speaking, this budget, this dynamism that we have created, this budget will make it possible to have national rebuilding and recovery programs for France. This is 40 billion euros. It will enable the individual countries to really make progress. It will change the life of our fellow citizens in Europe. That shows European solidarity. That's the most important thing for me, and I don't at all rue this experience. Well, let me add that right now, globally, multilateralism is very much under pressure. And Europe has shown with 27 member states that at such a point in time where we are facing unprecedented challenges, and this challenges, in many ways, has not yet unfolded its really difficult potential. We will see that in the next few months to come. And now we are in this very special situation, and one has to decide whether one wants to resort to special measures. And we've decided on this in May to actually initiate this new policy. We work together with the Commission in many, many ways, and that in many ways fills me with satisfaction and gratification, because we were able to convince others also to come with us on this road. There were questions on governance, for example, questions as to how the member states can actually verify whether that this money is well spent. In the beginning, I thought, well, can one actually do that? Can these different viewpoints be bridged? And then one worked on this for days with great intensity and a lot of creativity, and we were able to do that. It was possible, and I think that this means we can be encouraged, we can be hopeful now that this next stage for Europe will be some that we can actually weather together very well. Markus Preis from ARD as the next question. Good morning, Madam Chancellor. Good morning, President. I hope you both can hear me. I have two questions, one addressed to the Chancellor. Madam Chancellor, on your role as President of the Council, we have seen that there may be now all of a sudden very different constellations that has met for the first time on a very important issue on Brexit. Were there moments when you would have liked not to be Council President? And President, you said at the outset that this is arguably the most historic, that the most historic dimension of this agreement is to take up loans together. Can you explain to us why you think this? Well, I was very happy that already at the beginning of our Council presidency, I was able to work on this important project, that I was able to support our Council President, Charles Michel, and to work together with the French President Emmanuel Macron. We worked together. This project of the European Union has never been just a Franco-German project. This is what people seem to understand right now, as if this were basically a Franco-German project in essence, but that has never been the case. What is true is that when we two do not work together, then a solution will be very difficult to find, if at all. But there are others, of course, who play a very important role in this European Union, and that's clear. And there are also groups that see matters differently, and also the inherent balance in the European Union has changed after Britain has left the Union. If you think of the MFF 7 years ago, at the time, the viewpoint of David Cameron loomed very large on the agenda. Now Britain is no longer with us. That perhaps means that other member states will come to the fore. It's a new dynamism now. We have to learn how to deal with this, but Franco-German initiatives play a very important role in this, but only one important role. Now, on taking up loans together, I think what one has to see is that so far the EU budget has been a very reduced budget, only 1% of the EU's GDP. There were very few funds that were then allotted, and then obviously the contributions of each and every country, and people were trying to get their money back. So a relatively small budget and not a lot of communitarization. But now, for the first time, this is a recovery program that we have launched where we go to the market and offer them our guarantee together, and that is historic. So we show trust in each other, we show solidarity to the rest of the world, in order to also, try and gain the trust of the markets. And that is the first point. Now, on Greece, for example, we have done that in a very targeted way for loans. But there's a second point where you see the historic dimension of this program. We use this money to give it to others as loans, but also these grants are used in a way as transfer money. And that changes everything, because we're creating a budget contribution with this within the Eurozone, because we decide that we use this money that we get from the financial markets and inject it as a priority into those countries that have been most affected by the crisis. This is also the underlying philosophy of the 18th of May that has been taken up by the Commission. So these are legitimate transfer monies that are also verified along economic criteria by the Commission, and the repayment, and that's going to be obviously linked to a distribution, an allocation key, depending on the difficulties of the economies. There will be a very balanced and fair distribution, and there will also be own resources built up over the next few years. So this can be deepened even more. What we're trying to structure right now is a common solidarity, and that is very exceptional. And indeed a new budgetary possibility and program that will turn Europe into an effective power in this crisis and will enable it to consolidate its efforts. This is only possible when we have this budgetary means at our disposal. And so this is indeed a moment of great change for Europe and for the Eurozone as well. Über the context. And Hubert from Context. Yes, good morning. I would like to know whether the question of own resources was also debated. Many were not for own resources, many members. And also the question of carbon neutrality. Do you think that it will be possible to convince others of the validity of this by 2023? Well, we have agreed on the plastics levy, as we've already outlined in February, but on the other issues, we still have some road to cover in ETS. Actually, the ETS revenue, for example, has already been factored in our national budgets, but we also have the task to develop a digital tax on international level. We also have to talk a bit more about own resources in this context, but we will have to work on this. It will be on the agenda. We have started to do this, but there is still work that remains to be done. Yes, well, I can only share what the Chancellor said on this. Basically, own resources have been taken up as an issue in the budget. The plastics levy has already been mentioned. As soon as we have an agreement on the digital tax, we can decide how it is to be used. You've said this. There are other mechanisms that are legitimate that we want to further develop, ETS, for example, and CO2 border tax. But that is obviously a debate that needs to be led over the next few weeks and months. We don't have the same viewpoint on this, but it's a need, and this border adjustment tax is certainly something that's most important in order to render this compatible with our competitiveness. And competitiveness so as not to allow for an environmental dumping, but obviously it's most important what these funds are to be used for. For many member countries, these funds are already most important at national level, and obviously we have to come to an agreement on how these means are to be used, how these funds are to be used. We need to come to an agreement on that over the next few weeks and months.
Can you hear me?
Definitely.
Chancellor and President, good morning. For President Macron first, according to sources in the room, you talked about how the frugal four in Finland were putting the European project in jeopardy with the constant cuts. And I know you talked about the success of this, but give me a sense of what you think perhaps could have been achieved if the cuts on the grants weren't as much. The cuts from elsewhere, perhaps science and the just transition. And Chancellor Merkel, and you talked about the void of David Cameron this time and other forces in the room coming to the fore. Perhaps could you elaborate on that and tell us about the power dynamics, perhaps Mark Rutte coming to the fore and, not just being this Franco-German relationship in the EU?
I will not in any way now describe the history. I have said that due to Britain leaving the European Union, we now have to find a new balance among the 27 remaining members. We have a number of countries here that come from a specific tradition back home, but what's important is that we were able to describe this new road, that we have now a new budget, but we've also set up the recovery fund, and the countries that we mentioned will also participate in a very special way. And we were able to do this. These countries had a long way to travel. And for Germany, too, this whole idea of a recovery fund that is also based on the Commission being able to make debt and to borrow money, and that needs to be ratified by the European Parliament, was not easy as a concept. So I can very well understand that those member countries that have not really dealt with this had to travel a longer way. But what counts is that they themselves agree to this, no matter what sort of viewpoints were voiced over the past few weeks. What counts is that we were able to come to an agreement, and that enables us to convincingly come up with an answer to the challenges of the future. Now, on your question, I think it would not be the right point in time nor the right moment to in any way stigmatize that there are different views, different traditions, different environment from which people come is only natural. That means that we have to work harder to come to more convergence. That has been an effort at the very heart of the European Union over the past few decades. We have not been able to actually bring this to an end. Also as regards the fiscal union, we have not really been able to achieve that. Now, on the frugal four, the fact that they are important net contributors, and that there are certain political situations with coalition government back home in those countries, and that they obviously have to be held accountable by their parliaments, and very important elements in this respect. The risk that we run here is that we may well then do the populace in those countries a favor. And what was important was for these member countries and the heads of state and government to convince them to come along. France doesn't have this kind of political system, but many countries have that. So we have to help each other to try and convince each other's public of the validity of our points. And so that was part of this dynamism, but of this debate, but that shows that there are many divergences still, and that we have to come to more of an agreement. But that's legitimate, I think. The historic character and dimension of what we've been able to achieve, well, as long as we have an MFF that relies on national contributions, this will be with us. And this is, after all, a budget that will always elicit a national debate on what sort of money people get back. It's not difficult to explain. If you look at the budget situation of a country that contributes a lot, for example, it will have also economic advantages. And this would not happen if we did not have the single market. So if one convinces countries of the value of the single market, then and that if you allow other countries to do worse, that then even successful countries will lose more than they actually get out of it, or that they actually have put in. That is something that is difficult, obviously, to do. But it's something that we will continue to do, these mechanisms of solidarity, of transfer. That is something that we need to do. And if we're able to do that, then we will be able to show solidarity with each other, and we'll also be able to see the yield for each and everyone, the advantages for each and benefits for each and everyone. Now, we are building on a construct that is unique in contemporary history. Europe is an unique entity of multilateralism and cooperation on a continent. It's unparalleled in many ways, and we've seen how important it is over the next few weeks. Thank you very much. This concludes this press conference. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you to journalists and also to technicians who made this possible. Thank you.